Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I want to take a step back today in this blockchain series and really kind of revisit the first video, which was trying to explain everything in a sort of very simple real world analogy that takes away any of the sort of computer fancy mathematics kind of stuff and explains it in real physical terms. If you see over to that side of the screen, you can see all the videos so far in the series. So I think we're currently up to 9 videos. So you can see if you're interested in sort of skipping ahead to some of the more advanced videos, you already understand the basics. Then here they are, and just pick it up from there. So yeah, without further ado, let's get going. So in the first video, we mostly talked about this a friend over here who devised this kind of innovative, cool way of storing the checks that he was supposed to store in boxes each week, where the boxes are stacked on top of each other, and theoretically, unless anybody else knew the trick, it was easy for an auditor to come in once in a while and inspect this stack of boxes and ensure that nothing had changed in terms of the contents of those boxes since the boxes were assembled. Okay, so nothing was retrospectively added or even modified to the contents of any of the boxes that had been closed and sealed on top of the stack. So if you remember, we had these kind of crazy atomically accurate scales, which will even register changes in the atomic weight of whatever's put on them, right? So if you take a piece of paper and you put it on there, and then you write something on that piece of paper and put it on there again, you're going to get a completely different reading, right? So that's one of the underlying I guess pillars of the analogy. So these kind of unrealistic scales that literally will give you a completely different reading, even if you so much as put a dust particle on there, right? So, and then we talked about the fact that this system ensured that nobody could creep into the office and just basically put an extra check in one of the boxes, or change the contents of one of the checks if one of the cashiers had realized that they'd made a mistake and not handed over a check to the back office in time to be stored away. Then they might be tempted to actually break into the storeroom and try and just slot it into the box. But again, unless they knew the trick, that there's a cover sheet inside each box which gives a pointer to the weight of the previous box in the stack. Okay, so we're going to kind of continue from there. I kind of, please watch the first video if this kind of basic analogy is not familiar. I'll try and make it as straightforward as possible, but this video is really going to be about carrying on the explanation, but really kind of going into a little bit more detail about the distributed side of it, right? So I've tried to think of a way to sort of broaden the scenario and broaden the analogy to sort of encompass in a slightly more accurate way than I mentioned in the first video, that represents how the distributed aspect of the blockchain works. Okay, so the scenario is as follows. So if we just carry on the story from last time. So let's say so our original guy over here who had the first idea of doing this, we've already suggested he had a good idea of doing this, but he's a bit lazy. He doesn't always keep track of his workload, and he sometimes misses putting things in when in the boxes in time. So he sometimes has checks that should have been filed away in the box for 2 weeks ago, and he sometimes just sort of has them lying around and doesn't stay on top of things, and then so he can't really be trusted to do his job very efficiently. So once in a while he actually goes in, right, and he pops a check in a box from 2 weeks ago, and then he essentially reweighs that box, right, and then he modifies the cover sheet in subsequent boxes all the way to the top. He knows the trick, he plays the system, and so his employers want to find a way to actually prevent that from happening. Okay, so what they do is they design a new system, right? And let me describe the system. Again, it might seem a bit far-fetched, but I think it's the best way I can think of to explain how it works. So let's say, so if you remember, the underlying requirement is that this bank requires a paper copy, and it can be a photocopy, that's perfectly fine, but it requires a paper copy of every check that gets submitted to the cashier. It requires it to be kept in a safe place, in a system which ensures that once it's stored in that system, it can never be removed, it can never be altered, and in addition to that, nothing can at a later date be added into that system. So and as if it had been added in on a previous date. So that's the goal, right? The goal is that to keep a paper copy of every check that's been submitted via the cashier, right? In a way that is that none of the contents can be tampered with, and the checks can't be removed. So, but as we've already discussed, our original storeroom guy, who was originally the only person in charge of doing this, it's emerged that he goes on holiday once every few weeks. So during that time, the system grinds to a halt. So he's a bit lazy and a bit lackadaisical and doesn't really keep on top of things very well. So what they decided is we're going to employ 3 separate people. So we're going to hire 2 extra people to do exactly the same job as this guy. Okay, and what these people are going to do, so instead of the cashier handing the original paper checks directly to our original guy in the back room, what they're going to do is the cashier is just going to send a fax of that check, okay, and they're going to send it to a fax machine in separate rooms, in which each of our 3 backroom storage guys work, right? So each of these guys has their own identical office with a fax machine, and it receives a paper copy, so a printout over the fax machine of every check that comes into the system. Okay, and that fax machine, it spits out those checks, so it prints them out and it spits them out into an out tray, right? So it spits them out into an out tray as they arrive, and so what these guys have to do is basically manage that out tray and make sure that the checks that they receive in the out tray are stored in boxes in this system, which is future proof and tamper proof. Okay, and the key thing is that neither this guy or this guy or this guy are inherently trusted by the bank. They rely on these guys to act completely independently of each other. Okay, so let's take it from there. So in the previous video, what the system we had was such that our original guy over here, right, he was told, okay, every week take all the checks from that week, put them in the box, put them on the scales, put the box on the scales, weigh the scales, and stack it up, and do that process each week. Now, with the new model where the 3 employees are actually employed to do the same job, things get a bit more complicated, because this fax machine, this fax link that they're using, it might be the case that this guy over here, his fax machine was not working, and so he didn't actually receive a particular check that these 2 received, right? So it's not quite as simple as just saying, you can't assume that at the end of every Friday, okay, at the end of every Friday when this guy would normally do his exercise of taking the week's checks, putting them in the box and putting them on the scales, you can't assume anymore that all three received the same check printouts from the fax machines. So if you you can't assume that if they all just say at the end of every Friday, take whatever checks you've received, assuming they're all the same, put them in the box, stack them on top of each other, and you can guarantee that they're all going to have the same contents. You can't, because these three guys have, they're relying on the fax machine, and they're not necessarily 100% guaranteed to have all of the same checks in their out tray. Okay. Now, so what the bank decides to do is to shake things up a little bit, right? Shakes things up a little bit and says, okay, so instead of actually making this a once a week exercise, okay, instead of doing that, I'm going to do the following thing. I'm going to say to each of these guys who are doing this job, you just focus on one thing only, right? And that is, look at your out tray, right? Look at the checks that come out of the fax machine into your out tray, okay? Take those checks, take an empty cardboard box and just keep it on those scales, right? So keep the empty box on those scales. Take those checks that are coming in real time, right? And when they come in, just throw them in the box, right? And weigh them, okay? And at the same time, you can put something else in the box as well, which I'll come to in a second. But instead of presenting and sealing a new box every week, seal a new box and put it on the stack as soon as you get a reading from the scales, which reads the following pattern. So basically, sorry, I haven't drawn that very well. 0.XX000X, right? So basically, and I could have thought of any random pattern in there. It could have been 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But the point is, keep weighing the transactions and so monitor the transactions that are coming in through your out tray. Just chuck them in the box, okay? Keep weighing that box and just carry on trying until you get a reading on the scales. Don't forget, this is a ludicrously accurate scales, right? It will pick up, and like at the atomic level, it'll pick up ink particles and whatever. Keep doing it until you get a reading on the scales that contains the pattern decimal point dot XX and then 4 zeros and then X. XX, X, non-zero. Okay, I'll just write that there. Okay, so we've got a pattern, a required target pattern in the weight reading of our box. Now, you might be thinking, well, okay, so yes, the fax link for these guys might not be entirely reliable to all three of them all the time. They might not receive the same checks at the same time, etc., etc. But often it will be. So they're kind of all trying to solve the same problem, right? If they're getting the same checks, they throw them in the box. Normally they're getting the same reading, but you say, okay, well, in addition to the checks going in the box, you also have a bag of let's say sand, right? A bag of sand that you can take. You can basically drop grains of sand in there, and then throw the bag of sand in the box and weigh it, right? And each of these guys are at liberty to tweak the contents of this bag of sand in addition to the transactions that they're getting over the fax machine. And that bag of sand lives in the box. I'm going to draw the box on there as well, and then on there as well. So the bag of sand goes in the box, but the bag of sand, they're continuously adding and removing little grains of sand from the box just to get that minute level of detail, just to get the reading that they need. By the way, so let me just say one thing as well. The bank says, in return for successfully finding a box full of recent transactions and a bag of sand, that actually contains this pattern, we're going to reward you something, right? I'm not going to try and sort of like make an analogy about the reward, but let's just say they get a bonus if this guy, as opposed to this guy or this guy, is the one who successfully first manages to from the latest transactions to actually find a box contents containing the recent transactions and this bag of sand with all the grains of sand that he added or removed, that actually contains this pattern in the weight reading. Okay, so basically what they're doing is that and they're saying, and the bank also, by the way, I should say, sorry, but the by and large, so the extent of the reward that you get is also proportional to the number of checks, right, that you fit in the box, right? So if you can imagine, these guys are now incentivized, all of them, to listen to what's coming in over the fax machine into their out tray, these paper checks, the copies, throw them into the box because they're going to get a bigger reward the more the more checks that they have in the box. Then they're going to take the bag of sand that's also in the box, and they're going to keep sort of tweaking the grains of sand and just watching like a hawk, watching this reading on the scales, right, to see whether they get a reading that is of the form that's been set to them by their employer, that says find a reading that is 0000, right? So let's say let's assume for the time being that they all have these identical 3 boxes, and it'll hopefully become clear in a second how and it's about this guy down here, the forklift truck, how they arrive at so they all have an identical copy of the first 3 boxes, right? And the 3 boxes contain the cover sheet, right, which is here. They contain the bag of sand that was required to combine with the transactions and the cover sheet all together to get a weight reading that met the specific pattern that had been set for them. Okay, so they all have the same 3 blocks of transactions, and I also want to go back and say the bank still believe that it makes sense that ideally, even though previously our guy over here was doing this as a weekly task, they actually set this target so that if these guys are kind of doing this job full time on a reasonable basis, that they're listening to the checks that are coming in over the fax machine, they're storing those checks in the box, and they're also tweaking that bag of sand, putting grains of sand, taking grains of sand out. If they're doing that all the time, they set this target such that on average, one of these guys will hit the jackpot and find a weight reading that has this pattern of something point something 0000 something about once a week, right? This is kind of a statistical estimate. Some they might get lucky and they might do it after 2 days. None of them might manage to do it for 2 weeks, right? Nobody knows, because it's a game of chance, right? They're just tweaking the contents of this box. They're adding grains of sand, they're taking grains of sand out, okay? But on average, the bank thinks that based on probability, in order for if there are 3 of these people doing this job, excuse me, then this is an appropriate target to set, such that it's going to take roughly a week before any one of them is going to say, okay, fantastic, I've found a combination of transactions and also grains of sand that give me this reading on the scales, right? When they do that, they basically close the box and they put it on the stack. Now, if you just look towards the right of the screen here, I want to tell you what happens at this point. again, the analogy is extremely far-fetched, but I'm trying to explain it such that if you follow along, at least you kind of understand what's happening. So each of these employees, they've been doing this for roughly 3 weeks, and they have 3 boxes, and they're all identical, right? They're all identical. They all contain the same transactions, the same cover sheet, which says what is the weight of the previous box, and then the bag of sand that they used as well to basically to tweak the contents so that it would give you this magic pattern over here. So what happens when our guy over here successfully finds a weight of 1.32000067 kilos for the box for all the transactions that have appeared since this box here, the last box, was closed, right? So he's been playing around with the contents of this bag of sand. He's taken the transaction in his inbox, and finally he's found a combination of those two which meets this desired pattern, that you got four zeros after x.xx000. So in the analogy, this guy knows, okay, fantastic, I've got the reward now, right? And the reward that the bank pays me for laboriously taking the transactions, putting them on the scales, tweaking the sand, taking the next transaction, putting it on the box, or putting it on the scales. I'm going to get that reward. I've won, right? The next box is mine. Okay, so what does he do when he finds this? Well, he calls up this. So the bank employs also a forklift truck driver, right? And this is probably getting even more ridiculous by the second. But he calls up this forklift truck driver, okay? And so while he's waiting for the forklift truck driver to appear, what he does is he gets two identical cardboard boxes, right? I'm going to get the color here. 2 identical cardboard boxes to this one. He photocopies all of the transactions that he'd managed to get into this box, right? That are part of that weight of 1.3200064. He photocopies all of them, okay? Puts them in those 2 boxes, okay? He takes the bag of sand that he used, okay, to actually achieve that 1.32000067 with the transactions, and he meticulously, okay, I'm sorry, this is ridiculously far-fetched, but he meticulously counts the grains of sand in that sandbag, and he creates identical sandbags, right? Identical sandbags for those 2 boxes, and puts them in those 2 boxes. So effectively what he does is he says, okay, I've created this box with this bag of sand, right? And then these particular checks that I've received over the fax machine, I've put them in the box, I've tweaked them around until I get to this weight, which corresponds to the target weight that has been set to me by the bank. So he creates 2 identical copies of that box, including the sand and including the checks that he used, and he puts them in the boxes. So when the forklift truck arrives, okay, the forklift truck arrives, and basically it loads up these 2 boxes, right, and then it takes them into the rooms or the offices, depending on where they are, of the other 2 guys who are still doing this, right? And they stack those boxes on top of their own box, right? Just like, so this guy, he's won the jackpot, right? He was the one who actually managed to find the magic number, right? x.x000x. He made copies of those boxes, including the transactions, and he arranged for copies of those boxes to be sent, okay, to the other participants who were trying to do the same thing, but in this instance failed to do it. So what these guys do is as I said, they take the copies of the boxes and they stack that on top of their existing stack. Okay. Now the last thing that these guys have to do, right? These guys are obviously they're a bit miffed that they've effectively lost this week, right? So they've all been laboriously trying to weigh things this week and trying to tweak the grains of sand and find that weight. But this is the rules of the game, right? So when somebody wins, they have to basically wait for the forklift truck to arrive with the new box. They have to stack that box on top of their existing stack. And there's one other thing they have to do, which is they have to look at all of the checks, right? All of it. This is a really painful process for these guys. It's not a painful process in the digital world, obviously, but in terms of the analogy, this is a very painful process for these guys, right? Because what they have to do is they have to look inside this box, right, that they've just received from the forklift truck, and they have to look at all the transactions, every single one of them, right? And they have to look in the box that they're currently working on, right? Because all of these guys have all these guys have a cardboard box that is that's on the scales, right? That comes from their out tray. In actual fact, it'd be easier. It'd be easier if we just modeled that the fax machine just drops checks directly into the box. So I wish I'd gone from that from the start. Okay, that's fine. If you kept up till now, hopefully you understand. But the fax machine, it populates checks directly into the box that's sitting on top of the scales. So what these guys have to do is they have to actually look inside the box they've just received from the forklift truck. They have to look in the box that's on their scales, right? And they have to literally go through and remove any checks from their box that's currently on the scales that was already in the box that they received on the forklift truck, right? So they literally have to throw them away, just get rid of them, all of them, because they've already been included in the box that they received on the forklift truck, right? And it's very important that every check, only appears in one box. Okay, so the fax machine has been spitting these checks into the boxes, and these guys have to, when they lose the battle, so when they receive the notification that another participant has actually won the latest box, they have to put the copy of that box on the top of their stack, and then they have to meticulously go through the box on top of their scales and remove all of the transactions that are inside that box, right? So, and that really, if you understand that, right, if you understand that physical analogy, you really understand a lot about the underlying concepts of what's going on with blockchain. The first video talked about, I guess, more about the interdependency between blocks, right? The interdependency as in, and it all comes down to the previous block weight over here, the previous box weight. This is more about the distributed side of it. So essentially what that means is that you can, even though this, I'm going to draw this in red, right? So even though this network here, right, cannot be relied upon to be 100% available or 100% accurate or equivalent to all of these guys all the time, right? It might be that this guy's fax machine is not working, this guy's fax machine is not working at some point in time, whereas this guy's might be, right? So the point is that without there needing to be a sort of any trust applied to any one of these guys, this auditor can actually come in and audit the blocks, the boxes, or whatever you want to call it, the blockchain, and he can know that he can expect and ensure that all of these participants will have the same blockchain, the same stack of boxes, right? Because this is the protocol. They use the forklift truck driver. As soon as any one of these guys manages to find a new box with the correct weight target, right, 00000, the forklift truck driver comes straight to that guy, says, "Give me a copy of your box, including the sand, right? And I'm going to take it to all the other offices where the other guys are working, and they're going to stack it on top of their stack, and then we know you've all got exactly the same stack. Now you all start working on the next layer of the stack, and then as soon as one of you wins, as soon as one of you finds a new value, a new box containing the latest transactions that meets that specific pattern, you're going to call the forklift truck driver and say, okay, come quickly. I have candidate. I have new boxes. Please take them to the other guys so they can stack it on top of their thing. Now, the one thing that I also wanted to kind of allude to here is that if for example the bank starts to employ more people, okay, more people doing exactly the same thing, right? Just because, let's say this guy is going to be away for 6 months, and so they employ this person and this person to cover for him, and then this guy comes back, and then all of a sudden you've got more people doing this job than before, okay? So in that case, you might find that because they're all trying the same thing, right? They're all trying to basically take the checks that they're receiving over the fax that they're ending up in the box on their scales, and they're all trying to weigh it, and as soon as they find a reading from the scales that meets a specific number, they're calling the forklift truck driver guy saying, "Come over, take a copy of my box which I've made, or take take several copies of my box and distribute it to all the other guys who are working the system so they can stack it on top of their stack." If there are more people doing that, then you're going to find that it takes less than 1 week, which is what the bank wanted, right? The bank wanted on average for it to take 1 week before somebody managed to hit the jackpot and find a weight meeting this value, right? So the bank says, well, okay, so now there are 5 people doing this rather than 3. So in actual fact, we've seen over the past couple of weeks that it's actually taking 7 days rather than 2 weeks to actually create the new box. So what I'm going to do is periodically I'm going to readjust this target. So I'm going to send a broadcast to all my participants here saying, in actual fact, now there are 5, the target is now X, so some non-zero value and some non-zero value, point X, 0.00000 X, right? So now these guys have to keep laboriously weighing their scales and tweaking the bag of sand, etc., until they get 0.00000, which is obviously much more difficult than 0.00000, right? The pattern is more restrictive, so it's going to take them longer, and that's a very key concept. So this video is kind of, I guess, all about it's trying to give an analogy around, I guess, Bitcoin mining, and how the difficulty of mining a new block, or let's say finding a new box, is adjusted according to how many people are participating. But I also really want to kind of use this as an analogy to kind of to express how this auditor, based on this model, can go to any one of these participants, right? Because of the forklift truck driver who diligently waits for the call and says, all right, yeah, I've got the new box, it meets the target of 0.00000, come and get, I've made copies, so I've made photocopies of all the checks, and I've duplicated my bag of sand down to the nearest grain, so I've put them in the boxes, please come and collect them and give them to all the other participants, and they will stack them on that stack, right? Because of that rule that's in place, this auditor can then go to any one of these guys and say, okay, let me see your record of transactions. Let me see it. As in, I don't depend on this guy or this guy or this guy to have been either at work or to be trustworthy or whatever. That they all have a distributed identical version that's reached by this model, right? So I think what I really wanted to get across in this video is the fact that the real power of blockchain is the lack of reliance on any one individual in the system for trust, right? So any one of these could leave the bank at any moment in time, and all the other guys have exactly the same copies of the transaction stack in their boxes as everyone else, right? And so one of them could leave, one of them could turn out to be a complete and utter crookster, but the point is, unless he was in collusion with essentially the majority of other participants in the system, again, when the auditor comes in to validate the checks, right, and check that, okay, the contents of one box, and the cover sheet. Please see my previous video if you're not familiar with the cover sheet, but that points to the correct weight of the next box, and etc. 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 The point is that one corrupt individual in the system, or one absent individual in the system, cannot bring the system down, because if there are enough other individuals in the system that have the same message, right, they have the same version of the blockchain, or in this case the box stack, then that is the version that is accepted as the truth, right? So I guess it's not always easy to kind of to explain these concepts in a purely physical analogy, but I think for some it might be useful. If you sort of have any questions about this at all, please leave them below. I'll definitely get back to you. I'm passionate about sort of conveying this stuff and making it understandable and accessible, and the point is that it really is not that complicated. It's not rocket science. So if I've not explained it in the best way, or if there's anything that's not clear, then leave a question. I'll get back to you very quickly. And please see to the on that side to see all of the videos in the series. This is a kind of extension to the first video, but thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your comments. If you like this video, obviously it's quite a crowded space. Lots of blockchain videos out there. If you like this video, please give it a like, please give it a comment, and please subscribe. And because I've got a few other tracks that I'm working on, and so I'm kind of focusing on the areas where I get most traction. So if you like this blockchain video, if you like the series, then please subscribe, please like, and all that stuff. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.